What's up, 7th grade? Mr. Agnos here. This week we're going to look at multiplying fractions and decimals. So we call that multiplying rational numbers. Rational numbers are any number, including those that have fractions and decimals after them. So last week it was nice integers, right? No fractions or decimals. This week we got messy fractions and decimals, and we have to keep track of the positive and negative situation. All right, so here's one type of question that you're going to see. It says, is each product positive or negative? Explain. So a product is the result of a multiplication problem, right? So when it says product, it just means, hey, that's the answer to a multiplication problem. And notice it's not asking us for the actual answer. It just wants to know, hey, is our answer positive or negative? Okay, so we don't actually have to calculate what negative 1/2 times 12 times negative 1/4 is. We just need to say, hey, the final answer, whatever it is, will be positive or will be negative. And we have enough information to do that. So I'm going to show you how we did it last week, and then I'm going to show you another way to do it. So the way I had you do it last week is I said, hey, just take, here I have 3 numbers, so let's just start on the left. So I'm just going to sort of, again, imagine I'm just cutting off this chunk right here, okay? I have a negative times a positive, right? I have a negative times a positive. The signs are different, so this is going to be negative, okay? Whatever this is, the answer is going to be negative. Now I have to take this negative and multiply it by this negative right here. So for step 1, we had a negative times a positive, and that got us a negative. Well, now for step 2, I have a negative right here, I have a negative right here. So now the signs are the same. So I have a negative times a negative, and that equals a positive. So by the time I'm multiplying all 3 of these numbers out, my final answer is going to end up being positive, right? This was step 1, this was step 2. So I can drag this over here. The other way to look at this is anytime you have 2 negatives, right, you're going to get a positive. So what that ends up meaning is if you have an even number of negative signs, I mean, I could line up 50 numbers in a row, some positive, some negative. If there's an even number of negative signs, they're all going to pair up and become positive. But if there's an odd number of negative signs, there's always going to be one that's left out, one that's left over that doesn't have a partner, doesn't have a dance partner, that's going to turn the whole thing negative. So we can say that, hey, if I have an even number of negative signs, okay, again, it doesn't matter. I could have 12 negative signs, 100 negative signs. Those are all even numbers. If I have an even number of negatives, my answer is going to be positive. And if I have an odd number of negatives, there's always going to be one left over, right? For example, if I have 3 negative signs, well, these first 2 right here, they're going to get multiplied, and they're going to become a positive, and then I still have this one negative left over that's going to turn everything negative, because now I have to multiply this positive by a negative, and so my final result will be negative. So when you're looking at these problems, sort of the simplest way to do it is just count the number of negative signs. And you can see that this holds true for this first problem that we did. I have 1, 2 negative signs. So that's an even, oh, I put this in the wrong column. This is an even number of negative signs. So the final result is going to be positive, right? These 2 are going to pair up, right? This one is going to dance with this one right here. Those are going to make a positive, and then we have to multiply it by a positive. So let's see here. I have a negative times a negative. I have an even number of negative signs. I have 2, so that will be positive. Here I have 2 negatives. Again, it's an even number, so that will be positive. All right, here I have an odd number of negative signs. I only have the 1. So a negative times a positive, we know that's going to be negative. Here I also have an odd number of negative signs. So I can show you this example real quick. When I multiply these first two numbers together, right, negative 13 times negative 3, those two negatives are going to pair up and make a positive. Right? So negative 13 times negative 3, that's going to be some positive number. And then I still have to multiply it by this other negative that got left out, right? That doesn't have a partner. So I end up with a positive times a negative, and we know that that is negative. So again, odd number of negative signs, and we get a negative number. So again, this looks really confusing. Right? Look at all these decimals, and there's 4 of them, but just count the negatives. I have 1 negative, 2 negative, 3 negatives. That's odd, so it's going to be negative. Here I have 1 negative, so that's going to be negative. Here I have 1 negative, so that's going to be negative. So that's probably the easiest way to look at it. And again, I'll summarize that one more time. If we have an even number of negative signs, you're going to get a positive number. And if you have an odd number of negative signs, you're going to get a negative number. Let's see if I did it right. Got it. Okay, so these problems are going to be similar to what you did previously, except now they're fractions and decimals. So fractions and decimals are not that bad. Fractions especially, because multiplying fractions, you just multiply straight across, right? Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So I'm looking at this first problem right here, 8/9 times negative 3/4. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that. So it's a little easier to see. 8/9. Our little dot means times negative 3/4. All right. I like to handle these problems in 2 steps. The first step is, what is the sign of my answer? Well, I have 1 negative sign. That's odd, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And then you just multiply straight across, right? Numerator times numerator. 8 times 3 is 24. So 24 goes on top. And 9 times 4 is 36. Okay. This is the correct answer, negative 24 over 36. But if you go ahead and you type this into digits, it's going to say you have the correct answer, but it's in the wrong form. It's not simplified. So we have to make sure we simplify our fractions. So we look for the greatest common factor. What number divides evenly into 24 and 36? They're both divisible by 12. So if I divide the top by 12 and the bottom by 12, all right, this was stuff I think you guys did a lot of in 5th grade, so it's probably been a while. Then my final answer is 24 divided by 12 is 2, and 36 divided by 12 is 3. So this would be the final answer. Okay, these 2 fractions right here are what we call equivalent fractions. They're equal, it's just this one is not simplified. All right, on the right-hand side, we have a mixed number. And if we're going to multiply a mixed number by a whole number, we need to convert this to an improper fraction. And the way you do that is you take the whole number, you multiply it by the denominator, and then we add the numerator. So negative 1 times, well, we know it's going to be negative. So 1 times 7 is 7, plus 3 is 10. So this equals negative 10 sevenths, right? And our denominator stays what it originally was. And we are going to multiply that by negative 2. If I want to multiply by a whole number, I have to turn it into a fraction. And the way you turn a whole number into a fraction is by putting it over 1. Okay. Now we're basically in the situation that we were over here. We're just going to multiply straight across. Let's think about the sign of our answer. I have 2 negative signs. Okay, there's a negative and there's a negative. 2 is even, and anytime I have an even number of negatives, my answer is going to be positive. Now we don't put a positive sign there. We just leave it blank. and then 10 times 2 is 20, and 7 times 1 is 7. Okay, if you get an answer like this, an improper fraction, you have to be careful about how digits wants the answer. They may tell you to leave it as an improper fraction, or they may want you to convert it to a mixed number. If you want to convert it to a mixed number, remember you say, okay, well, how many times does 7 go into 20? Well, it goes in, 3 times would be 21, so that's too big. So it goes in 2 times. That gets me to 14, right? And then that means I still need 6 more 7s to get to 20, right? So I have 2 and 6 7s, right? 7 goes into 20 2 times, and then 20, which gets me to 14, and 20 minus 14 gives me my 6. So it may have you input the answer this way. It may also have you input the answer this way. You just have to read the little blue writing to see how it wants it. Okay, we got one problem left, and that involves decimals. So basically, we're going to be doing the same thing. It says you own 57.08 shares of stock in some company, right? Maybe it's Apple. Maybe we own some Apple stock. The value of each share drops 20 cents. What is the total change in the value of your stocks? All right, so this right here, we know we're going to multiply 57.8 times something, right? This is how many shares we have, 57.08. And each share drops 20 cents. Drops is the key word here, right? Drops 20 cents. So we're going to represent this number with a negative 0.20. You don't have to put this first 0 here. Some people do, some people don't. It doesn't change the value. So this is the math problem that we end up with, 57.08 times negative 0.20. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set this up vertically. Multiplying decimals is no big deal. You're just going to ignore the decimal, right? And I'm also going to ignore this negative sign. I'm just going to put a 0.20 there. Okay, I'm going to ignore this negative sign. I know my final answer is going to be negative, right? I have a negative times a positive. So whenever I get to my final answer down here, I know it's going to be negative. So I'm just going to do the math, and then whatever answer I get, I'm going to make sure that I make it negative. All right, 8 times 0. Let's see if I can, well, it's all going to be zeros, right? Because we're multiplying by a 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, plus, I got an add a 0 there. All right, 8 times 2 is 16, carry the 1. 0 times 2 is 0, plus 1 is 1. 7 times 2 is 14, carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. All right. So I have 0, 6, 1, 4, 1, 1. Okay, so that's just the multiplication. And notice I ignored the decimal. Now, to figure out where to put my decimal, I count how many digits total there are behind the decimal point. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 total numbers behind the decimal. So I start here and I go 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's where my decimal point goes. Okay, so my final answer, in this case, remember we know it's going to be negative, is 11. And then I believe, I checked the solution order, they want us to round this to the nearest cent. Well, the nearest cent would be right there. So I look at my 6, that's going to round this up to a 2. So this is, we lost, that's what the negative means, $11.42. So the product of those two numbers is negative 11.42. That's how much money we lost on our Apple stock. All right, I know I went a little bit fast. So these problems, it's going to be a lot of trying to remember what we learned in 5th grade, and then adding positive and negative to that. Okay, as always, I'm happy to go over as many questions as you guys like in class. You can rewatch this video as many times as you need to, but hopefully you found it helpful. See you soon.